All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gord Stephen. I'm a senior researcher at the National Renewable Energy Lab and a co-lead on GPST's Pillar 5 on open tools and data. I'm very excited to welcome you today to our webinar with Boris Dali on the benefits of open source software from a power system operator's perspective. I'll give just a brief introduction in case anyone's not already familiar with GPST and who we are and what we do. So GPST, or the Global Power System Transformation Consortium, is an expert and practitioner-driven initiative engaging key power system operators, research and educational institutions, governments, businesses, and stakeholders across the world to accelerate clean energy transitions. GPST's work includes performing cutting-edge research, performing implementation support for world-class engineering and operational solutions, supporting workforce development, building and disseminating open access data and tools, and accelerating localized technology adoption, standards development, and testing programs. And that piece about open access and open source software is what the focus of today's conversation will be about. Just before we dive into it, a couple housekeeping items for the webinar. So as you join, you'll be automatically muted. And if you'd like to ask a question or engage in conversation, please do so either through the chat feature or the Q&A box at the bottom of the window. If you have any technical issues, we also have Sophie Schrader online here from NREL who can help and assist with that. So you can reach out to her through the chat. You can adjust your audio settings as needed. If you would like to activate captions, if you click on the three dots and in the menu and go to captions, you can set that up with your language of choice. And we will be launching a survey at the end of the event. So look for that and provide your feedback. We really value your input on how we can improve these moving forward. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and we can switch over to Boris and get into the presentation. So while we do that, I'll give you a little bit of background about Boris. Boris Dali is the director of the Open Source Program Office, or OSPO, within RTE, the French transmission system operator. And he's also in charge of the organization's sustainable IT strategy. He's a member of the RTE R&D Management College and is also on the Technical Advisory Council of Linux Foundation Energy. So with that, Boris, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Gord, for this introduction and this invitation to have this occasion to speak to pure player professional of the grid of a topic I think will change something like everything about the energy transition. So thank you so much for this time. We'll try to have a time for Q&A. I think this is the most important part of this webinar. So I'll try to go really fast in the deck of slides I have. The slides, this deck is about 60 slides, but I won't go to this 60 slides, but it's an interesting material, I think, for you if you are interested by the subject after this webinar, to have follow-ups on more knowledge about this topic, and so feel free to use the slide and to share with your community just after this webinar. It would be a pleasure. So Gord already introduced me, so I think it's okay for me on what has been said. So thank you. The agenda quickly. First, maybe we are not a huge company. We are a very French company, European company, and maybe a few figures and answering who we are. I would like, through these questions and the answer I'll try to give, to tell you what is this shift about on the open source software for my company RT, but more than that, it's a global shift for the entire world. And when I say world, is public player and private player, academics, administration, regulator, etc. Everyone is connected to these questions. And of course, let's have time for Q&A, follow-ups, and key takeaway we can share. So quickly, RT is the French transmission system operator. We are in the center of the transition, at least at the European scale, because thanks to the geography we have. And to give you just an overview of our missions, what is important to know is we own the assets. So we are in charge of the management of this asset, the maintenance, the building of the new feature of the network. And of course, we manage the balance between load and production. And we also offer a place for the market of electricity to happen. So we are on the three stacks of what is a TSO in France. It's singular. In Europe, you will find a lot of TSOs that are only in charge of the load, managing the adequacy. Key figures, we have something like 3,000 substations per substation. Our level of voltage starts from 63 kilovolts up to 400 kilovolts, and it's also a singularity in Europe. Other TSOs are more connected at first for at least for the lower level. It's generally 120 kilovolts. So we have more networks than the other, also because of this shift, this level. I'm not able to say in kilometer how many lines we have, but you can see it. We have our own optical fibers in order to manage the telecommunication network we need for the critical operation. It's not the usual Office 365 things. It's only for our needs for control and command and critical operation. We have 37 interconnection through 52 cross-border links. So it's a pretty important place in Europe, as I said. We have 10,000 employees, and concerning the figure, the financial figure, it's not matter so much, but for the R&D, we have a dedicated budget of 40 million per year. And concerning the ICT, we have something like 300 application in production. Some are very critical, and we invest each year 175 million on these assets, digital assets, in order to do the work I described on the three layers and the R&D. To finish quickly with the figure, we have almost 1,000 customers. You see the composition, it's pretty obvious, producing, distribution, market player, and heavy industrial consumers. I already said that we are at the heart of the power system and energy transition in Europe. At the center of this circle, we hope, double the capacity of the interconnection in Europe through 2040. We are a national grid, we are a natural monopoly, and so we are regulated. It's important to say that we are 100% public owned, 100% public owned. And that's why we are compatible with this philosophy. This philosophy comes from the open source and free software world. There's this catchphrase, public code, public money. We can think the same concerning the datas. The datas are not in the scope on my speech because as Gord told you, I am in charge of the open source program office and the open source software program office. I'm not in charge for the open data. It's another unit in the company, but of course we share a lot. So public code, public money is something it's compatible. It's not our philosophy by default, but we are compatible which would be the subject, the open source software. To finish with figures, this is a consumption we have each year in France. Here's the projection. we guess this is the average scenario we think about, and it's really depending on how French country will reindustrialize or not. We have 4 subsidiaries, and I won't speak about that. Just to tell you that the one RT International who can do business, we are not allowed as RT French company, public owned, and allowed to make benefits. So this subsidiary is able to, and it's very competent in digital services solution, also relying on the open source solution we will share here. So that's it. So first question to answer about open source is why? Globally speaking, why do we shift to open source? But I'm sorry, I forgot to put one slide here, but it's at the end of the deck. I won't switch to, I will try to do it like that with the hands to tell you what is open source software first, jumping into this discussion. So open source software is way to manage the cooperation between different stakeholders who has the same goal to build a digital asset. And this governance is pretty well synced because it simplifies a lot the IP question. So everything is about this governance model, and underneath, at the very end, it's about the kind of license you put on your software. You have closed source software we are very used to use as agreed utility. We are very used to use closed software. We buy it, we don't know how it works because we cannot see the code. We only have sometimes the documentation and we have the features. We run it and we pay for that. And it's done. And if you have new needs, you have to challenge the roadmap of the editor of the solution and of the vendor, and maybe you will take it in account. Or sometimes you have to make. I will come back to make or buy versus make together. It's one of the key takeaways of this presentation. So open source is a way to manage how you make cooperation on digital assets. That's it. And it simplifies everything to share at the end without any IP trouble at the first place. So why energy domain and grid actor like us should consider to shift from our habits about contract management on digital assets to an open source way? So globally speaking, I'm sorry, I have to move the Zoom window. I think it's okay. So globally speaking, the energy transition is something like the North Face we have to climb. We can either choose to go alone, all alone, everyone, turn by turn, one by one, or to go in a rogue team. Going to the open source way, globally speaking, is trying to make it together and to be secure and to think together of the optimal effort we have to do on this null space. So it's about welcoming as soon as possible, as stronger as possible, the distributed renewable energy on our grid, and changing completely the model, both from a market perspective and a technical perspective, about flexibility, demand response, electric mobility, smart service, everything you, of course, perfectly know in your business. Sorry. Oops. And we know that the software is an essential enabler to achieve this transformation. Why? Because if you have a network and you want it to do the mutation needed by this shift of waterfall to distributed system, electrical system, software is obvious because other industries already made the shift and demonstrate that with the same material infrastructure, when you put this layer of digital services upon the system, it becomes very agile and you can go more deeper in the capacity, in the availability of this network. So solution to monitor, to controlize, optimize, I will come back to that later, and to understand the future as the complexity is growing. So it's a general topic of shifting on open source, but very concretely, why, as a French grid operator, we want, and we did the job, to jump into this open source software journey? Because we had pain points, both from the control room operator's perspective, and when I say operator, it's of course the guy behind the keyboard, but also his manager, and of course, this is the regulator, etc. They are fully concerned by, they are fully involved in what control room should do nowadays compared to before. And the same on the field through the substation technologies layer. What are they capable of on this screenshot, and what will they be capable of in the near future? We have to shift this from an R&D and from an ICT point of view, so information communication technology. Both we have to increase our speed for innovation. And if we have to remind something in this exchange, is open source is not only a promise, it's a demonstration, and it has 30 years of history demonstrating that it increases the speed of innovation and the time to market. We'll go back to that in production. So this pyramid of needs, we are managing it really better now that we are in an open source governance model more than a contract management model, because interoperability is a promise that we have in the world, and it's working thanks to the standards. And thanks to the standards, the international and regional standards organization, ISO, IEEE, it's a member of the GPST. So all this huge structure offers interoperability, but sorry, only in theory, because when you go to the vendor solution and concerning the digital estate, I'm pretty sure a lot of people in this conference is okay with that, agree with me. You read the doc, you read the standards, and you code it. But when you code it as a vendor, I don't say that they have incentive to do it, but they have to understand what the standards say. But they do it alone on their own product, on their own roadmap. And then, is it operable at the end? Can you connect a brand from a vendor to another when it's about making the digital substation control command to work together? I think we all know the question. The answer is no. But what if you jump to the open source way and you make the specification together, which means the interpretation of the text as a human conception of the text to a line of codes, which is machine interpretation of text. So open source is a very convertative way to be interoperable. So if we have to return, one of the things important is open source is not a sufficient, not a necessary condition, but it works for interoperability, and Gord has a lot to say on that, because it's not only the question of the software, but the ecosystem of the software. So let's stop that for this moment. I will go only to the bold words, and we can rewind if you want. Read this list carefully, and we can, of course, see more of that. Speed of innovation, I already said that, also for the time to market. And the last but not least key advantage in this strategy is that the vendor lock-in is a real subject. And it's a question sometimes of sovereignty, and it's sometimes a question of resiliency. So with open source, you have a global, worldwide, free as a speech, but not as a beer. You have a free asset that you can tailor-made all together as a community. So you have the power on the digital solution you not own, because no one owns it. It's a foundation. We'll see that later, but foundation of that as a natural actor. So this is one of the answer of the title of our meeting. What is the value for French / European / global grid? Wherever you are on the earth, you have this advantage if you jump to the open source. I'm sorry for this slide. I don't have the time to make it perfect, but just we are used to make when it's about having digital services or applications or software, call it as you like. but we are sometimes, when you have the workforce internally, or if you have contract management for workforce to develop concept and make the conception, developing the software you need for your business. So either you make and then you buy, sometimes you start from scratch. It's very costly. You have to specify everything. Do you reinvent the wheel? Who knows? Sometimes we know, sometimes we don't know. Or we buy. This is a business as usual. Either we make or we buy. When you buy on the shelf, I'm pretty sure everyone knows that, you will have to bend the product in order to match, to fit with your needs. So in both ways, you have a lot of effort to do. There is a lot of pros and cons. And sometimes in a cycle, the executive people say, okay, we will make, it's better. Oh no, we don't have the human resources. We don't have, I don't know, cash. So we buy. And there is another way. And this other way is, what about make together, even if we are sometimes competitor when it comes to the vendors? So I will develop that later on, but stop building new. The energy transition from a hardware's perspective, I mean by raw material extraction on planet Earth. And on the software side, we need to go slowly on that. Stop building new. Try to optimize what we already have, and we have a lot. So this consumption reflex, we need to stop it and say, okay, what exists on Earth? And what better than open source to say what exists? Because it's not commercial brands you have to penetrate. No, it's a community where you can exchange with people, real people, and say, okay, what exists? What are you working on? So it's another very powerful value of the open source. And what about stopping this? I don't know if you know that, but since I am an employee in the IT and R&D, we have the cycle. It's a financial question, so it's kind of a topic. Each 5 years, we redo the digital service we need. Because we didn't make the documentation or we used the bad framework. We have a lot of technical debt inside. So trying to repair, to fix, to make it evolution of what we made, it's not possible. So when you take the make solution and you have the cycle of birth and death, etc., it's very costly from a TCO point of view, and it's from SDG point of view, not the best reflex. And then we should shift to this reflex, which is for some digital assets, not all, they are not all eligible for that, but for some, the most critical one we have. What about never-ending project? It exists. If you take the Linux kernel, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but the Linux kernel is the operating system you will find everywhere in space, in the vehicle, and sometimes in our substation. This precious common software on Earth is a never-ending story. Maybe it will restart, but in a very long run. Now when? I'll try to accelerate a bit. The story for RT. I'm very proud because I was a student in 1997 in the same company. It was not RT at the time because we were vertically integrated with the production, transport, and distribution. But I was a student, and when I was an employee at the end of my studies, I was the first guy to put in production my project of engineering, which was to migrate a very critical solution on load shading, called the shading system. It was a Unix private company based on X25 protocol application, and I migrated to Linux kernel base. I was passionate about Linux at the time, and through TCP IP protocol. So it was the first jump we've made, but it was a huge one, because it was most critical. And we began to be used to use open source. And it's an important word I put there, it's downstream. It's, of course, abuse. Downstream, you pull what exists as a common software in the world, and you take it for you, and you use it for your own needs. So this is the downstream. The upstream, we will see just later, is when you have something, for example, a very important R&D work, and you put it in an open source way, available for everyone on Earth. This is the upstream movement. And another upstream description would be if something exists, you need it, but you want to improve it, and you contribute to that. You are doing upstream. So in 2007, Gabriel, who was at the time a simple R&D researcher, asked to his boss about, it was on the power grid modeling abstraction, what about upstreaming the software our own? And the management say, are you crazy? No way, impossible. And now we are speaking, Gabriel is the director of the R&D department. So guess what? 10 years after, our subsidiary, RT International, saw a message in a bottle in LinkedIn. It was Shelley Goodman, PhD on the energy. It was Trump at the time in the United States, and she was very concerned by the SDGs and the electrification of the energy, and she can't find any stakeholder there locally in the United States to say, okay, I want the energy transition to happen through the digitalization. How can I do that? And we kept this message. We had a meeting with her. We met her in France, and the story began. The story of the Linux Foundation for Energy, I will speak about just later, began like that. So I will jump the story. You will be able to have more after. And now I go to the how. In the open source reflex, exactly as I told you just before, you have a reflex. You have to hardly put it in your mind. Is the first reflex is to say what already exists, what already happens. And concerning the open source, some industries, and here's telecommunication, already did the jump 10 years before our ID in the energy. And they already demonstrate how powerful it is for the interoperability needs. All the players of an industry, all the vertical of an industry needs to develop it, to make the conception together through the open source. So the ONAP project is something you should look at if you're interested of transposing what happens in the telecommunication to the energy. I won't make the demonstration, I don't have the time, but it was very inspirational for us in 2017 when we went, sorry, in 2018, when we went to San Francisco with few fellows to discover what is open source in a real challenging vertical industry. So we have the description, you have the figure, and maybe you know the story. So we were inspired by these other industries. And of course, it was obvious for us to see that reuse is obvious, sharing effort is obvious, both from a workforce perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And everyone is really sensitive to that. When you speak to the executive level, it's kind of obvious. Improve modularity, it was on the advantage for the pain points, to tackle the pain points. The interoperability, I spoke already about that, and the release time cycle. This is very important. Another promise that is demonstrated by the open source, and I will speak about that for RT very concretely in a few minutes. You increase the time to market for the end user with an impressive factor. Okay, collaboration, vendor locking already. Okay, so, but another very key learning we had in this study tour we made in 2018 in the Linux Foundation headquarters was, okay, at the first place, even if what you are thinking is not clear, begin by thinking big. So we were already thinking globally. As a small, very French company, not very well known in the world, we directly said, okay, we will build a foundation. I will answer why foundation. But think big. But even if you think big, it's more French reflex I'm speaking about. It's kind of cultural thing. We often say, okay, we think big, we do the conception, and when it's perfect, we begin to work. But we learned this reflex is think big, but act locally, start soon, start small, and fail fast. It's a real cultural shift. We were not able and used to fail. Fail is not an option for us at the first time, the first plan. Sorry. So now it is, and we learned that, okay, don't be shy. You have something, put it public. Release early, release fast, release often, but improve forever. And the demonstration will make the communities grow. So this is a very, very key takeaway from me. So what for? Why, when, how, but what for? We create a global industry strategy, and the target was to build a community to share what I'm sharing with you today. How huge is the effort of communication if you want to spread this message? Maybe you discover something now. We're speaking to everyone in the energy. It's impossible. You need a focal point. And here's the strategy of foundation. It's a very powerful, recognized, neutral place to have this occasion to speak together. And we're speaking about the shift that concerns centuries. So we're not speaking a small thing. We need something who has huge reputation and effect. And the Linux Foundation was a good place for that, because Linux Foundation owns the most precious common software we have in this world from a civil and military perspective. So yes. What for? Create value. We spoke about the cost efficiency, but we didn't spoke about an HR topic, very important and perfectly demonstrated in many companies in my teams, because I was manager for 5 years of a developers team. 2 years, it was 2 years ago, before I jumped in the R&D. Recruitment and talent retention, both from an internal perspective and an external perspective. By external, I mean contract management. If you say, we are in this project working on the energy transition, it makes a lot of sense for the guy. And we're working it through the open source way. I promise you one thing, you will have the best if you hire them as a workforce, or if you, through a contract management, join your team. You will have the best guy, and they won't leave because they will take a lot of pleasure together. So pleasure, I don't know for you, but in France, we're not used to speak about pleasure KPI. It's not possible to monitor that. But I have a lot of people in the company as an OSPO director who comes to me to say, hey, Boris, I'm addicted to open source. I won't go in any project that is more closed source for the company. What is the portfolio? So in the OSPO, you will find the best subcontractors and employees coming to you saying, okay, I want to stay in this ecosystem. So it's not, and it's not singularity. When I speak to other OSPO, it's a constant thing. A reputation of your company and branding and feedback for all this. Speed of innovation, just a demonstration. We released a code. It's Power System Blocks. We'll speak about in a few minutes. It's library you can, like Lego bricks, put together and build a system. And it's fully open source, and it's something like, I don't know, 15 years of R&D and then of ICT production. When we released it, some people wanted with us try to make things together. For example, safety at a European scale, it was a coordinated security analysis in the grid. So some player on the expertise of making software came to us and say, hey, can we try together to do a proof of concept on this coordination of security analysis? I said, yes, okay, let's go. Because it was very interesting at the time to try to demonstrate the power of these new assets we released in open source, in upstream. Guess what? The feedback I've written here is from them. It's a subsidiary of Porsche, the car company, well-known car company. And they told us after the success of the proof of concept, it was during the COVID. So we were remote, fully remote, and everyone has to take care of the child, the grandfather, etc. So it was a mess. And during this time, in 3 months, we did a job that would have been 3 years of work for them. So it's just to tell you that this is a proof. It's not a public thing I can share. I can share it here in a webinar, but I can't make an article for that because it's not public. But it's to give you a real insight on what it can be and what it is. And from my point of view, I will speak about Operator Fabric if we have the time. Just after, Operator Fabric is a solution for the coordination inside the control room and through the different control room we have on asset management, on managing adequacy, and sometimes market and cybersecurity. So all these guys have synchronous notification for concept of last time to decide. They have a notification and solution embedded with a notification, with a ranking, and they can either automatically or humanly, manually speaking, do actions, remedial actions. So Opera Fabric is a very, very, very powerful framework. And guess what? We share it with the entire Europe. And guess what? Sometimes other in the community have very great ideas. The notification I'm speaking about in this framework are like in your smartphone or your PC, you have notification, added value notification. Okay, it's great. So it's a stack, it's a feed of notification, and you play with that. Guess what? Some player in the Netherlands, not TSO, but DSOs, had the very great idea to say, okay, I want to geographically localize this notification. We never think about this kind of reference, this kind of needs, but we had it. When you have a thunder impact, when you have a wildfire, when you have a submersion, you need to know exactly where it happens. It was for free. It was developed by the Netherlands company inside Opera Fabric. We took it, we assessed, because the end user asked us to put it in production, and we say, okay, let's do the the assessment from a cybersecurity perspective. Is this called clean, safe, clean, documented, etc.? In 1 week it was done. 1 week after it was in production. When an end user in the control room say something to his boss or to the ICT department or the R&D, I want that, he will maybe wait 1 year before something happens. So it's another demonstration I really would like to share with you. The foundation is a game changing because you have an ecosystem influence you cannot have as a grid operator, as a French grid operator, where you are maybe 100% of, not 100, sorry, 1 per 100% of the business value of an operator. He will never hear your voice, never. But when you go to the open source and you say, okay, I want to virtualize my digital substation, but I won't do it alone. And I won't ask to vendors to do it because it's a shift that they are not ready to produce. It already happened once again in the vehicles domain and in the network telecommunication domain, but we need this infrastructure to become virtualized, patched over the air. For 5 minutes, you need this substation to do this work. It's not used to do that, but you have the power with the digital services to completely reconfigure in live your digital substation. So this is tripod, CPaaS, Compass, Flash Power is about. And we're speaking about a very, very huge market. In Brussels, 2 weeks ago, we had this meeting of the World Summit for LF, Linux Foundation Energy Foundation. The World Bank, through the Linux Foundation Human Network, was at the table. And this guy was really involved in the digital substation automation system topic, because you perfectly see how powerful this new market is. And open source is perfectly compatible with the market. See Red Hat model and the value of Red Hat. So it's an acceleration for our needs for the energy transition and the SDGs. And it's also something very interesting for the market. So it's a win-win-win-win-win solution. Compliance for the licenses and security. When you go to open source, you have very, very, very best masterization of what your digital assets are composed about. We speak about SBOM, so it's software bill of material. I won't have the time to jump in, but to go in details, but SBOM is a very, very interesting deliverable you can have, because you have the DNA of the subcomponent and the component you have in a global IT system. So you have the ability to assess the cybersecurity very deeply. Take the example of Log4j. When it happens, everyone was saying, okay, where is Log4j? The open source. Ask directly the question. Quality improvement, because your community won't grow if you have not a good documentation, and if you have not a clean code, modular, interoperable, etc. No one will knock at your door. It's not readable, it's not understandable, it's not doable. So they won't. But if you have this technical debt management, and it's a reflex by default in the community management of an open source project, guess what? The quality improve in a 100 factor. And it make a long time project also because it's clean when they're locked in already. So what? This is a picture. It's obsolete. I'm sorry, because it's not well classified, but it's kind of a map of what exists in the Linux Energy Foundation project. So by that, I mean very healthy product solution for your needs when you are distribution grid operator or transmission system operator, and sometimes a market player on the EV charging or whatever. There is a lot of solution, and this is the one where we are deeply involved because in 99% of the case, we are either the main maintainer of the project. So it means it's a former IP owned that we released publicly in the open source domain, or where we contribute to. We don't have the time to say what project do what and how RT is involved in the community. But you will have the slides, you will have the link to all these projects, and in each project you will have a community link where you can go to the Slack. So if you are interested, just asking questions. It's the conception of the open source, and it's kind of magical. When you go to a Slack and say, hey, I'm this engineer, I'm working on this project, I'm used to make or buy, and here I can see that I can jump in your, guess me, you will be really welcome to answer the first question and then to be a member of the community. So go to the website of each project. So sorry, I won't deep dive in to let us, as we said, time for question and answer. We also have this ecosystem, Cresim. It's more for low technical readiness level projects. Cresim is, I have a map of, I'm sorry, I forgot. I have a map of all the members. There is a lot of huge university in Europe and sometimes in the United States, and more than academic, sometimes industrial, pure play of the energy at a global scale. And they detect the interest, not of LF Energy, but for the research as Lotiron once again to contribute. And sometimes based on European funds, huge European fund is the case for TwinEU. So Cresim was made with kind of people who already understood the interest of the open source, but concentrate on the research. So there is this panel of project, and in the pyramid of the value of this association, World Association Cresim, it's 100% open source. And when the material as good, we put the project inside the LFNG. So we have already this pipeline of production ready for production from the ID to ready for production. So Cresim is very powerful R&D ecosystem. So if you're interested, you have the link also in the slide. Then the question, where do we do open source? We have a GitHub account, a branded GitHub account on Réseau de Transport d'Électricité in French, and we have something like 33 projects. It's a bit of a mess, but once again, don't be shy. Release often, early, often fast, fail fast. That's what we do on GitHub. We are very agile. Sometimes it disappears, sometimes coming back, sometimes it's a mess. It's not documented, no problem. When it becomes viable, we will maybe go to the door of this LF Energy Foundation. And even if we are a strategic member, we don't have the right to say, hey, this is my project. It's in the LF Energy. No, there is a peer review. And if you are a general member, strategic member, don't care. The peer review is very ritualized. And if you don't check all the process, you won't jump in because you have to be viable to jump in. And so that's where we put the viable project. Christina spoke about that. We work with the IEC concerning the open standards in order to make them more agile on the digital standard production, to change the habits and to change the nature of the IP of the deliverable. So we are doing it on the ontology for the digital twin description around all the lifecycle steps. And from all the point of view you can have at what is a power transformer. So we are working on this proof of concept. Is this proof of concept interest you? Ontology, description of the data model of what is a power transformer? Please feel free to ask or to contact me after. Think Smart Grid, it's a French and European ecosystem. So same for ENSOE, it's the association of the TSOs in Europe, and they produced a lot in the past, but through the whole way, documentation through Office work, not on GitHub. So they are not so agile, and we are trying to make them more agile through the open source habits. With whom? There's more than that. Maybe twice or three times what I was able to grab here. We don't do open source everywhere here, but they do open source. They sometimes are very used to and best as us in open source habits. But this is an ecosystem, and all the members at the top, it's the strategic members of LF Energy. But yes, we do a lot of open source with a lot of people. So time for Q&A. We will share the follow-ups and key takeaways just after. So I hope I'm not alone.
Thank you so much, Boris.
Oh,
that was
thank you,
that was
Gord.
really great. Yeah, you're not alone.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got some applause coming in as well.
Oh, thank you. Wow. Whoa. Thank you. I'm not used to that. Thank you. So what about the question? Do I have to read somewhere or someone transcript
Yeah, I
what has
can
been
read them
said?
to you. We don't actually
Thank you,
have any
because
questions yet. So if
okay.
folks have questions, please do either put them in the chat or in the Q&A box. I can get us started with a question though. Something that I hear a lot when I'm talking to people about open source software and barriers to adoption that people might perceive. It sounds like there's kind of a perception, and I think you've done a lot here to dissuade that, that adopting open source software means going out and finding some repository that someone you don't know has uploaded and taking that and using it in kind of in a vacuum, absent any other kind of mechanisms for support or guarantees around reliability, or even things like documentation. So
Yes.
could you speak a little bit to that and kind of the different, I mean, not all open source is created equal. Some projects are that, but others are not. Could you speak a bit to that spectrum and what you do internally when you're thinking about adoption of open source tools?
Yes, thank you, Gord. It's a tremendous question. It's very simple to ask. There is a reality. Everyone can do what he wants on GitHub. In 5 minutes, if you already have a GitHub account, or just set it up, and you can do open source. It's impossible for a grid operator who will rely on your work to accept a piece of software like that, even if it's one of the mind-blowest possibility of perfect mathematical instantiation of an algorithm, etc. No, you won't rely on this kind of work. It's impossible. So there is two key things to answer to your question, Gord. When you are a critical actor, and by critical, of course, grid is critical by design, but whatever, so the answer is generic. You have a methodology that has been built by the Linux Foundation, and the name of this methodology is CHAOSS. It's CHAOSS. I don't have any link on, so I'm sorry, I'm doing it with the hand. So CHAOSS is the KPIs you need to check in order to know if the community you are joining or questioning is viable. So CHAOSS is the most important part of the answer I can give you. There is a lot of other things, but this one is the main one. And if you go to the foundation reflex, it begins to be easier, because the foundation maybe sometimes already did the job of the chaos check, and each time there is a commit, they are doing the recalculation of the KPI. So the foundation are not a sufficient condition to have the guarantee you are looking for, Gord, in this exercise you suggest here to do. But it's a good way to say, okay, there is an ecosystem, because if it's in this kind of neutral place, it's pretty safe. And once again, they had to make a peer review before entering. So if you go to a huge foundation, you have some kinds of insurance, but it's not sufficient. So I hope I answered the question. There is a lot of other topics to share, but
Yeah, and I think the point that there are kind of established metrics to look at, and to some extent, certification process and things like that that you can lean on. Is a
yes.
great one.
And there is also cybersecurity topics, and there is a lot of OpenSSF. So, and also from a sustainable IT perspective, there are all other KPIs. But in the foundations, the huge foundations, they perfectly know that.
The cybersecurity question is what I was going to go to next. There's a number of questions about that in the comments.
Of course,
how do you address the issue of cybersecurity?
Yes.
Critical infrastructure, all this,
Yes.
protections,
Yes.
that type of thing. What
Yes.
Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yes, of course. The first thing I can tell you, if you go to Google or any search engine and you type LF energy, so in one word, LF energy for Linux Foundation energy, space, cybersecurity, space, electricity, you will have a white paper on the topic. But what I can tell you is the question of cybersecurity is not a question of closed or open source. If you go to the prime minister in France, which are responsible for the home and external security of the country, both from a physical point of view and a cyber world point of view, they will tell you that open source is the best way to do software for the cybersecurity threat, because you are able to see more than when it's a closed source. So this is almost a religion question when you go to closed source versus open source, which one is the best secured? There's no answer. There's just habits we have to build together in order to be able to assess the risk and trying to modelize the cybersecurity threatened model and to see what are the counter action we can take. So it's pretty mature in some case in the open source domain and in the OpenSSF. OpenSSF is this foundation of the Linux Foundation where there is a lot of work on how we can cyber secure our open source project. And when you have Log4j, when you have I don't know if you are familiar with what happens, and it was very vicious on the XZ library. It was a very, very, very powerful and patient hack. When you have this kind of events, it's a demonstration that it's impossible to secure open source. Exactly as it's impossible to cyber secure closed source. We are all threatened. And just to give you another thing, there is, you can find it through Google also, there is a Harvard Business School very recent research work on the open source value. And the question is, the answer of the question is the code base we all share through the open source. The value of that is $8.8 trillion. But it's not the question. The other question is this code base, where it exists. It exists in 96% of the closed source software. So closed source software like this iOS you see here is made of open source, and Apple has to build the credits. So check the credits and you will see there is a lot of open source in this. And in the cloud part of Apple, it's 100% of open source. So iCloud rely on open source, 100%, and iOS 90% of closed source and 10. So cybersecurity problem of the open source is in the closed source by design. 96% of the code base private is not contaminated, but so the question you ask is so critical on the supply chain construction of the software, and in a critical industries like ours. It's a watchtower we have to build all together. There is a lot of good practices, threat and reactions when we have a problem, but it's a never-ending work. And I think that this is the community of open source is the best place to tackle this problem, because it's not a contract problem. It's an effort we have to do together. We have to do the push-ups together on cybersecurity. So that's my answer. I'm sorry, Gordy, if or not Gord, but the person who had the question. I hope I answered a bit. It's a very complex question, but we manage it pretty well, I think, as best as we can.
Thank you. We've got a lot more questions coming in now, actually. I'll try and kind of synthesize some of them together. One question, maybe just briefly, you could touch on, elaborate a little bit on the licenses that open source software are released with. I think maybe there might be some question around, what are my responsibilities if I'm developing or using open source software, and the different landscape there. I know that's obviously we could have a whole hour plus discussion just on software licensing, and none of us are lawyers, but maybe just a high level overview, and maybe where RTE kind of is as far as what they're looking for and how they license their projects.
Yeah, when you do open source, you are at risk from this legal perspective. When you do open source, remember I spoke about downstream and upstream. In both cases, you can make a huge mistake. And if this mistake is not managed, it can cost you a lot of money. If someone sees that you are not exploiting the good license with the good conditions, and you discover that, and you go to lawyers, you will be in huge trouble. In France, for example, Orange, the well-known telecommunication manager, made a mistake in their internet boxes. Unbanded software was the GPL, so one of the most dangerous. I'm sorry to say that, but from an unboarded private company perspective, it's a very dangerous license. When you put it in your box, there is a contamination. And if you don't declare that, you made a huge mistake. They did this mistake, and it cost for them something like half. So it's 50 million euro to answer to this problem. So what we call it the license compliance process. Why we have an OSPO? An OSPO, an open source program office, one of the objectives is, of course, to define the downstream and upstream strategy and to share it with the executive level and on the field with the developers and the intermediate layers, of course. But another reason is to be able to check the compliance in each time we use or we produce open source. So there is a list of license, and the key point I can speak about very quickly is a question of the copyleft. There is strong copyleft licenses in open source world and no copyleft. When you are in an industrial field, it's better to go to non-copyleft like MIT or IPG licenses. Lawyers always avoid in the industrial world to go to the GPL because it's too dangerous, exactly as I said for Orange. So it's not a question of reflex, it's a question of understanding what copyleft is about. And copyleft is a kind of joke for copyright and copyleft. You put them face to face. So copyright is a usual way to manage IP, and the copyleft is a way to unlock these IP habits we had at the time when the license of open source has been built. So if you're interested, we can have a talk about the copyleft, etc., just to make as you said, a very good, big overview on that. It's a fully topic, but yes, you are at risk when you do open source. You have to do it carefully, and you have to check the compliance. There is a lot of tools for that. Open source review toolkit is the main known, and scancode.io is the second one. If you have this kind of tools, you are pretty well for managing this as on OSPO if you are mature or just an open source community in your company.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we could keep going for a while, I think, on these topics and others that are coming in. I do know we need to stop right at the top of the hour. So
what a pity. I'm sorry. It would have been a pleasure to stay with you.
Yeah, maybe we can do more of this in the future. So thank you so much again for your time and your presentation and your insights today. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending as well, and all the engagement and questions.
And do open source. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.